for Google specifically, think through your resume, try to make sure that your resume is really tailored towards the positions that you want to apply to, because that's really the window that any recruiter or hiring manager has into your history and your performance, right?
Thank you, Brandon, so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Would you please tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure, and good to see you again, Young. So I grew up in California in the Bay Area, and after I graduated undergrad at UC Santa Barbara, I started working in tech and marketing. So I worked at Intel in the Bay Area for a couple of years, and then I moved to New York and I worked for Citibank in consumer banking. And then I went to do my MBA with you at UNC in Chapel Hill. And I interned at Amazon in product management while I was there. And then after school, I went to work for IBM, and I was a digital strategy consultant for them in New York. And I was doing that for a little bit under 2 years when I started working at Google. And so I've been here for about a year and a half now on a strategy and operations team for display and video.
Gotcha. Kind of a follow-up question to your career path in general. So why did you go into banking? I mean, like financial services, or you call it, like after, working in Intel for quite a while, in marketing?
Well, I was a psychology major in undergrad, so I've always been interested in consumer decision making and all that, and I was pretty agnostic for industry. So initially I went into tech just because I grew up around so many tech companies, and so that was kind of the natural place to go. But then when I moved to New York, a lot of the connections I had were in financial services. So it was a similar type of role. I was in marketing still. It was actually a marketing information management team. And we were trying to figure out what sorts of decisions lead to changes in spend on credit cards, what leads to people being more responsive to marketing campaigns and things like that. So it was still grounded in my interests, but just in an industry that's more commonly found in New York.
And when you went into MBA, were you thinking about going back to tech?
I was thinking about it, but I was pretty open to doing either tech strategy or consulting. And I ended up doing a hybrid of the two, right, with IBM. So that kind of married both of my interests and was also back in New York where I wanted to move back to. So it was a perfect fit for me.
Makes total sense. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you work at Google. Can you tell me a little bit about the process of, getting into the company? Like, what did the application process look like? What did the, interview process look like? How long did everything kind of take? And did you have a referral?
I didn't have a referral, and I actually did not apply for the role.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I wasn't planning to leave IBM at the time. I was pretty happy with my position. I had a really great experience there. I got to work on a bunch of cool projects, but I was reached out to by a recruiter from Google via LinkedIn. They just emailed me. And so I figured, like, I had thought I would work in consulting for a few years, but Google was an aspirational company for me and the kind of place I would have wanted to exit to. So I was pretty receptive to even that initial message. And as I interviewed and went through the process, I became more and more interested and then decided to join.
How long did the whole process take? Because some of my friends who work at Google tell me the process was, longer than they initially thought, like a couple of months, for example. Like how long was it for you?
I think it can vary by team, but for me, it wasn't too long. I had an initial phone screening with the recruiter, and then I did a phone call with the manager. It was kind of an informal interview. And then I had the formal interview where I went into the office and I had to interview with 4 people in person, and took like half a day doing that. But it was just that one in-person interview, and I think the whole process might have taken about 5 or 6 weeks.
Gotcha. And this interview style or type, was it more like behavioral, or was it like more like, I don't know, like consulting type of strategy, or, like, can you maybe share a little bit about that?
It was a mix of the two. It was a lot of the interviewing style that we would have gotten in business school. So there was definitely a healthy dose of behavioral questions. And then we also had shorter, less formal case questions,
Sure.
which were really functional and based on the team I was going into. So thinking about like YouTube strategy and things like that, because that's what my actual work was going to be about.
Gotcha.
And they were maybe 3 to 5 minute cases, not the 30-minute formal consulting style case.
Sure. So, tell me about what you do. You on your LinkedIn profile, it says video strategy and programs lead. Kind of curious on what you do, especially because video. When I think about video, I think about YouTube, and you're still on Google side, so kind of curious on like what's going on with your role.
Sure. So we do cover video and display. Video is mostly YouTube revenue, and then display is via the Google Display Network. And so that's actually on websites all over the internet. You see ads that are coming via Google's network. And so it saves the web publisher from having to have their own ad sales team to fill ad inventory. Instead, Google people fill that ad inventory, and then the site is able to monetize that, and Google gets a cut of the revenue. So we help develop the sales strategy in order to increase revenues for YouTube and other sources of video revenue, as well as display revenue. And I'm on that general team, and I'm pretty specifically focused on customer incentives programs. So I help develop the strategy for what kind of incentives we want to provide advertisers in order to help them grow with Google, and also up-level their display and video capabilities so that they can keep spending with us in the long term.
Gotcha. So was this something that you've been doing in the past? And if not, did you have any learning curves?
I had some experience with online video, a couple different places. When I worked at Intel, my first job out of undergrad, I was actually working on a set-top box they were developing for OTT video. So they called the division Intel Media. And I had some other independent experience with online video. So I had a good amount of industry experience. And I think the functional part, a lot of that was developed in consulting and our business school education, and that all carries over into the role. I didn't have as much firsthand experience with customer incentives, but you use the same kind of thinking and processes that you would use in a lot of strategy roles.
Were you given any like training materials or resources when you first onboarded to the company?
Yeah, definitely. We had a whole big onboarding doc and then a host of other links and info decks, things that I could dive into. So I would say there was a lot of learning curve in terms of the products Google has, because our ecosystem is pretty complex and there's a lot of like third parties and tech integrations involved. So I had to learn quite a bit on that side. But as far as like the business fundamentals, Google operates similarly to a lot of other companies. And I think, the education that we got was a good grounding to make me valuable from day one.
Gotcha. That's, like resources and training materials because like some companies, like they don't really have any, like it's like, you just go figure it out. Kind of,
right.
There are a lot of companies that do that as well. So, what do you like the most about your role?
So one of the coolest things is that I'm on a global team. So we're covering the revenue for video and display all over the world. And I'm working specifically on customer incentives programs. So I have to interact with sellers and advertisers that are based all over as well. So in the last week or two, I've talked to sellers in China, Russia, India, Singapore, Australia, Brazil, Turkey, Israel, Germany, pretty much anywhere you could think of that Google operates. We have relevant business strategy that we have to figure out. And so it's really great to get to learn from the experiences that our sellers are having all over the world. And it leads to a lot of like interesting learnings for me. So that's probably the coolest thing about my job.
Yeah, when you say sellers, do you mean Like, can you maybe tell me what you mean by sellers?
They're Google employees
Oh,
that are
gotcha.
salespeople, and they work with our clients
Gotcha.
to
Okay.
try to optimize their advertising campaigns and
Sure.
ensure they're getting strong performance.
Gotcha. What's one skill that you use often today that you learned from the past experience that you didn't really expect to use today?
Wow. I'm not sure that I didn't expect to use it, but one super valuable skill has been learning SQL. So I did that at Citi just because they had so much consumer data from all the credit card transactions that they have to process. And you're probably familiar, but a lot of tech companies, you have to use this in typical business roles as well. And so that's super valuable at Google just because our data is all scattered across a number of databases and it's all self-serve. So basically, as strong as your data pulling capabilities are, is what you're going to be able to get to use for analysis. So I use that all the time at work. And I kind of built my initial understandings just based on a pre-business school role that ended up being super helpful for the rest of my career.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, SQL, I'll use it all the time, like everywhere actually.
Yeah.
So it definitely makes sense. Tell me a little bit about Google's, culture and maybe a little bit about the work-life balance as well.
Sure. So we're really customer oriented. So we're always trying to think of like, how does the work that we're doing impact our actual customers who are the advertisers, but also the users of our products, right? And so YouTube, for example, has over 2 billion users. And so it's pretty awesome when you think about anything that you're doing, it's impacting people all over the world.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of the work that we do, is just like considering the global ramifications of any changes that we're making. But Google also does a good job of balancing employee considerations and trying to make sure that employees are taken care of as well. So you probably are familiar, but we've got really cool, fun offices and they provide us nice meals and all that. And that's been great. And during the COVID pandemic, I think we've gone an extra step in trying to make sure employees are taken care of and that parents have flexibility to adjust their hours as needed so that they can take care of their kids. They've given us a number of extra days off to just kind of reset and recharge. And there's lots of check-ins to make sure that employees are doing okay, or teams can adjust as they need to so that people can be productive and comfortable. So I think they've done a great job of just like helping employees be productive by being happy and fulfilled while they're at work, and balancing all the different stakeholders that we have to consider in our business and how much it can impact people with even small changes that we make.
Yeah, no, that's really good to know, especially like during COVID. It's it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really challenging. So just knowing that Google takes care of the employees and that there are things that you can actually take advantage of is just really good.
Yeah, and it's obviously tough for any of us who have to sit at home all day and work remotely instead of being able to interact with our coworkers. But we've tried to organize lots of activities and events and opportunities for engagement and making sure people still have social connections despite not being able to see each other in person. So I'm one of the leads for the community building events on our team, and it's definitely pretty important, and our leadership puts a lot of thought into like making sure we have the adequate resources and enough consideration is given so that people feel like we have work-life balance.
Yeah. My last question is advice for those who want to join Google, if you have any.
For Google specifically, like think through your resume, try to make sure that your resume is really tailored towards the positions that you want to apply to, because that's really the window that any recruiter or hiring manager has into your history and your performance, right? Before you ever get to an interview, they have to be able to look at that one document and say like, yeah, Yang seems like he would be a strong fit for this role. So I think it's almost hard to put too much time into making your resume look good and tailoring it towards roles. But I would say more generally, like be wide in your career search. There's lots of great companies to work for. And so you want to find ones that are a match for your values and that are going to give you interesting and exciting work. But I didn't plan my previous moves all around trying to work at Google. And so I think you should always just look for the next exciting opportunity, whatever that is. And then you can adjust once you get there and figure out what fulfills you or what doesn't. But no need to be overly focused on just one company. Like there's lots of potential great landing spots out there.
You know what? Maybe one last question.
Sure.
So you mentioned that you were reached out from a recruiter. So was your LinkedIn profile tailored towards your current job? Is that why you think the recruiter reached out to you?
No, it wasn't really tailored. At the time, I wasn't looking to leave IBM actively. I think it was a mix of, we had our strong business school experience, I had the consulting strategy experience, I had worked at a number of tech companies, and I had worked in online video. So those factors probably led to the initial outreach, but I wasn't trying to tailor my resume to any external company at the time.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that was all. Thank you so much for your time today, Brendan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Young. Nice
Thank
talking
you.
with you.